Is Jaws 3 a bad movie? Well, I think I could answer that in record time. Okay, that was probably unfair. Let's go to the end of the movie to see if it improves. Okay, that's obvious. Jaws 3 is cheesy. But does the cheesiness make Jaws 3 cringeworthy, or does it actually make it endearing? Well, that's what I'm here to find out. I'm going to analyze Jaws 3 looking at 3 things it does well, and 3 things it doesn't do so well. This is the good and the bad in Jaws 3, also known as Jaws 3D. And strike number 1 is Jaws 3, despite being pretty shallow and cheap and just like an hour and a half long, there's some real depth to the story arcs and the character motivations. It's not executed super well, but there's effort here. Don't get me wrong, this movie is not high art. It's basically 2 sharks terrorize a giant Seaworld advertisement that Chief Brody's 2 sons coincidentally happen to be at, and one of the sharks happens to be the largest great white in recorded history. But beneath that preposterous premise, there's some substance here. Things like the ideology between Catherine Morgan and Philip Fitz Royce, where one argues to have the shark held in captivity versus the other wanting to just murder it on camera. This is not a very nuanced take, and yes, 40 years later, holding a baby shark in captivity is not thought of as the noble endeavor it probably was when this movie was made, but there's some real meat to Jaws 3's story hidden away there. It's clumsy and about as shallow as the water that the baby great white ends up drowning in, but it does just enough to add drama into the movie and to give Catherine a bona fide story arc that is surprisingly moving. Somehow Jaws 3 makes me care about these characters, even Philip Fitz Royce, played by the late Simon McCorkindale. But full disclosure, I am a fan of Simon McCorkindale for some reason, because I love that name. I played an entire D&D campaign as a character who was secretly Simon McCorkindale in disguise. Yeah, it was a strange campaign. But the point is I care about the Jaws 3 characters, including the Brody boys, who I didn't care about in Jaws 2. They are way more interesting here. Michael is played by Dennis Quaid, who apparently was high on cocaine the entire time, but I think he's genuinely solid here. Yes, his arc is superficial, he's got a job offer in Venezuela, Catherine is supportive but upset, and things resolve themselves when she decides, hey, she wants to move too. Nothing that happens in Jaws 3 informs this decision, it just happens. But Quaid and Bess Armstrong are just charismatic enough to make this work. Likewise, Sean Brody's arc is pretty shallow as well. He's afraid of the water after what happened in Jaws 2, and that gets resolved within 5 minutes of us learning that because Lea Thompson is hot. Still, I'm glad it's there. It gives these characters texture and shows that Jaws 3 puts in effort. Like the brotherly relationship between Quaid as Mike and John Putch as Sean feels real.
I was this close to doing it in the water last night, and that's a first.
This close, huh?
Shut up.
And side note, when I watched Back to the Future, I always thought Lea Thompson was cute, but Jaws 3 is the first time I realized that cute people could also be hot. I was this close to making Lea Thompson a strength for this movie.
This close, huh?
Shut up. And then we have Calvin Bouchard, who is Jaws 3's rudimentary take on capitalism, ruling common sense every which way. It could have come off as farcical with how often he makes poor decisions, but Louis Gossett Jr. does a good job hamming it up to just the right level.
Listen, nephew. It's a $2.5 million turbine that's not gonna go up in smoke because of some damn fish. Now shut the pumps down.
But even though side plots and characters are not a weakness in Jaws 3, the thing that causes them to lose steam is a weakness. The exposition in Jaws 3 is horrendous. Good exposition flows naturally with the conversation so you don't even notice it. This scene feels like it's specifically earmarked to introduce us to an important character, and then it shuts up as soon as the character's introduced.
The new additions to Seaworld are the brainchild of entrepreneur Calvin Bouchard.
Oh my God, the dead silence is hilarious. That was my entire point. No, that wasn't my entire point, because the bigger flaw here is that Jaws 3's exposition is all about telling, not showing.
Your brother's cute.
Yeah. Him and Catherine have been together for 1.5 years.
How about you?
Desperately unattached. Lonely.
Sure, this might be normal, awkward flirting, but the scene is just transparently giving us information about these characters and it doesn't work for me. What's surprising is it's directed pretty well. Rather than cut back and forth between characters, Joe Alves tries to follow in Steven Spielberg's footsteps with some decent one-shots. But Spielberg almost always injected it all with realistic and natural dialogue. That is not how this plays out. And for more unnatural dialogue, let's listen to Mike describe the filtration pipe, which is where the giant shark is hiding for the first 2/3 of the movie.
What about the filtration pipes?
No, it's too strong a current moving the other way. See, the flow's all into the lagoon. There's 1 million gallons of fresh salt water every hour.
This is not good foreshadowing because this just feels like an info dump. It doesn't seem to imply anything. So Jaws 3 decides to have Michael explain this all over again.
Brody, did you check the filtration pipe?
No, Calvin, the current's too strong going the other way. We got 1 million gallons of fresh seawater flowing into the lagoon.
Wow, that was almost word for word the exact same dialogue, and it still doesn't foreshadow anything because we don't know there's a second shark yet. The dialogue's not interesting enough to imply anything, so Jaws 3 just gives up and basically tells us that there's a shark in the filtration pipe. Because why else would the movie cut to all these super minor characters to talk about some stupid pipe for a third time?
Particular readings from the filtration pump,
Such as?
low outflow, and a pressure buildup on the inboard tunnel valve.
Could be an obstruction.
And at the same time this epic reveal is occurring, Catherine figures out something she really shouldn't be able to figure out.
Our shark couldn't have killed Overman. Its mother did.
She's basing this on the fact that they found Shelby Overman's body skinned. That's not the work of a shark, nor a shark's mother. That's the work of the predator. But maybe the most egregious bit of exposition is what we don't get. These characters hardly discuss that this is a historically huge shark.
Don't be silly. Indicate a shark of some 35 feet in length.
You said it exactly.
And that's the last they mention anything about that. But thankfully, Jaws 3 uses that 35-foot shark for some effective shark sequences, which is strength number 2. Now, please note I said some. That's going to be important as we go later in this video. But I really like that this is the only Jaws that really emphasizes underwater nighttime sequences. Gives it a very gritty and surprisingly scary atmosphere, like during the scene where the shark somehow skins Overman by doing this. Then later, there are a couple of moments where the shark just appears in the inky black of the water, and it's terrifying. And that brings us to Philip Fitz Royce's death. There's a lot that doesn't work here. For one thing, it's really confusing because the shark is moving so slow, and it's supposedly because of that outgoing pressure that Brody kept going on and on about. But if it was that powerful of a current, the idea that Fitz Royce is able to haul himself against it on this rope is laughable. But still, what a death! When that rope snaps, there's this sense of desperation that's just palpable. And then Fitz Royce gets sucked into the shark's mouth, and this is cheesy and confusing because the shark just opens his mouth and he's like, whoa! But whoever had the idea of having Fitz Royce get stuck behind the teeth and in the shark's mouth as it's crushing him basically, it's horrifying. And you can see he loses the respirator as well, which means he's drowning. And this sound will haunt my nightmares forever. Of course, Jaws 3 botches the emotional resolution of Fitz Royce's death by sucking at Exposition again when his buddy Jack is totally incomprehensible. And that jumbled, incoherent mess of a dialogue scene segues nicely into weakness number 2. Most of the shark attack scenes in this movie are a jumbled, incoherent mess. It looks like most of the budget went towards the mother shark because when we see the baby shark attack, it's clearly a puppet that deforms at the slightest contact, and it magically transforms into a real shark like an aquatic 3D Pinocchio, and the chase sequences are impossible to follow because it's just generic real-life shark footage intercut with cheesy dolphins saving Mike and Kate. The mother shark is more of a mixed bag. It looks terrifying with the sheer scale of the thing, and the tail physics are pretty awesome on the animatronic shark, something Jaws 3 won't let us forget because they can't stop showing it to us. But this thing moves at a glacial pace, and it just sort of swings its head around idly, opening and closing its mouth. It looks pretty easy to avoid being eaten by it, something that even a dolphin that tried to get eaten found out. And its speed during the ski show clashes with what we see of it underwater, because during that scene, the shark is able to keep up the water skiers as long as they're above water, but as soon as they fall into the water, it immediately transforms from a speedy above water fin into an underwater behemoth that moves like it's already in a food coma, despite it not eating anyone in this scene. It almost gets one victim in the form of Lea Thompson, but this scene is a joke. I mean, we have this POV shot as the shark is approaching, and then it just sort of bumps them into the water. Like, this shark is 35 feet long, it is historically huge, and it barely nudges them into the water. But then you watch the scene again and it gets even stupider, because this POV shot is not from the shark's point of view. No, it's from this asshole who actually knocked them into the water while they were trying to fix their bumper boat. And then with a free meal just given to her by this inconsiderate douchebag, this lethargic shark barely can raise her head out of the water, and with its enormous record-breaking bite radius, it barely takes a tiny nibble from Lea Thompson and then decides, no, I don't like Lea Thompson. This shark is not only slow as hell, it's also got terrible taste. And for all the pride the production team had in the shark's tail physics, during the climax it chooses to coast into the control room rather than actually swim towards it. Almost as goofy as the shark not moving at all are the actor's slow motion close-ups. This shark deserves to be mocked, not to be feared. Once the shark finally makes it into the control room, there's a pretty satisfying kill, and I do like the setup of Mike and Kate seeing Fitz Royce's mangled body in the shark's jaws still holding the grenade, a bit that was actually foreshadowed surprisingly well by Jaws 3.
The pin has to be pulled.
But as much as I like the creativity of this sequence, it's undermined by how the shark doesn't feel threatening once it's in the control room. I mean, Mike and Kate look like they're able to take their sweet time at a safe distance to come up with a plan. And then when the shark dies, we're treated to some horrific 3D that was inexplicably made into a cartoon? And I also hate how Calvin and Lisa are barely mentioned, despite the fact that they very well may have drowned. And also Mike and Kate completely forget about Calvin's nephew's sacrifice.
Oh,
What about the others?
Calvin made it. Lisa.
Mike! The dolphin!
There's a tiny chance that that guy's nickname was the Dolphin, and she's talking about him. But no, I think Kate just cares about the dolphin. And that's where Jaws 3 loses me with weakness number 3. It indulges in Seaworld and 3D to unhealthy levels. I don't mind Seaworld as a setting. I think it actually gives the movie an identity, and some of the aspects of the park are handled gracefully. But incorporating the dolphins in multiple scenes with the shark and having their survival be this huge emotional moment to end the movie on, it just feels dumb. Also, we essentially get an advertisement for Seaworld smack dab in the middle of the movie, which is just painful to watch. And that brings us to the 3D, and I'm sure a lot of it actually worked. I never saw it in 3D, but I think probably when the shark is coming at the camera, or just stuff is done subtly and with restraint, it was probably pretty effective. But then there are moments when Jaws 3 just rotoscopes in effects that just look silly. Like, check out how this submarine just starts disappearing. And then there's those moments when the movie just stops in its tracks to give us a series of 3D shots. The worst of these is when the two robbers are coming down the hill. We suddenly switch to a bunch of wildlife shots, including this incredibly fake looking snake, and then we get this frog, which inexplicably makes the robber gasp. Thankfully, this movie that has about 2 minutes worth of pointless 3D shots sprinkled liberally throughout is only 99 minutes long. Strike number 3 is this is a well-paced movie. That ensures that nothing overstays its welcome, even when the effects are failing or the dialogue is bad. We just go from one goofily fun scene to another. And a final note on the characters, the primary actors look like they're having a good time. When I was young, I always thought it was unrealistic how Mike, Kate, Sean, and Kelly act like goofballs. I was always like, adults are super serious. They're like all business. They don't have fun like this. And they all just were like acting like kids in this movie, and I was so confused. Now though, as a child trapped in an adult's body, their behavior rings true. They're acting like real people, like they're actually having fun in life. And I feel like that attitude carries into the production of this movie. Jaws 3 is not a well-made movie at all, but it tries so hard, and I have to admire that effort, even though the execution just isn't there. It's so cheesy, but whether that cheese is cringeworthy or endearing, I think it's 100% endearing. It's a bad movie that I adore watching. So thanks for watching this video, and if you adored watching this video, then please like and subscribe.